My name is Claire Bennett, and this is the story of how my husband learned, far too late, that the woman he called useless was the one holding his entire world together. The night he humiliated me, Daniel raised a champagne glass to his family, and with the whole room listening, he told everyone that after 2 years of carrying me financially, the least I could do was cook, because apparently that was the only thing I was ever good for. The laughter hit me like a slap. His cousins looked away. His mother smiled like her son had just won an award. And Daniel stood there, staring at me, waiting for me to cry, or to beg, or to shrink. He got none of that. What he got was a signed divorce. His own mother handed me the papers, expecting me to panic. I signed every single page without my hand shaking once. And by morning, Daniel would walk into a boardroom and find the woman he'd called worthless sitting at the head of the table. Because the company that had just bought his, the company that now controlled his entire career, was mine. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand who I was before that night. I was 32 when everything changed. For 2 years, I'd quietly carried my husband while he chased his corporate dreams. I cooked. I ran our home. I organized a schedule. I made sure he never had to worry about the ordinary responsibilities of daily life. And Daniel mistook my silence for weakness. Every promotion made him more arrogant. Every successful presentation made him act like he'd personally conquered the world. But what he never once stopped to ask was how? How was our life this comfortable? How was the household running this smoothly, with money to spare and a home that never struggled? He never asked, because Daniel was too busy believing he was the provider. He saw me working on my laptop at home and laughed at what he called my little side work. He walked past me while I reviewed company reports and never wondered why financial documents arrived in corporate security envelopes. He took late-night calls from me as background noise. He was so convinced of his own importance that he never saw the truth sitting right next to him at the dinner table. The truth was this: I wasn't surviving on his paycheck. I was the founder and controlling shareholder of Meridian Dynamics, a multimillion-dollar technology company. I'd built it from our living room, quietly, because I valued my privacy. I kept my ownership hidden behind legal entities and let a professional executive team handle the public side. My name never appeared where Daniel would think to look, and I never corrected him because I convinced myself that protecting his pride was harmless, that marriage meant letting him shine, that supporting someone meant shrinking yourself so their ego could survive. That night, I finally understood I was wrong. The celebration was held in an enormous ballroom, expensive flowers, crystal glasses, more relatives than I could count. Daniel had just been promoted to regional director, and his family treated the announcement like a royal coronation. His mother, Patricia, spent the entire evening reminding everyone how brilliant her son was. I stood beside him with a polite smile, accepting congratulations for a success I'd had no public role in. Then came the toast that changed everything. Daniel lifted his glass, raised his voice so the whole room could hear, and told everyone, in front of his entire family, that after 2 years of carrying me, the least I could do was cook, because that was the only thing I was good for. The laughter was worse than the insult. His cousins exchanged uncomfortable looks, but nobody defended me. Patricia smiled proudly. Daniel looked at me, waiting for tears, waiting for anger. Instead, I just stared at him, and in that moment, I saw him clearly for the first time. He had never once understood who was standing beside him. Before I could even speak, Patricia reached into her designer handbag and placed a neat envelope on the table. She pushed it toward me with a satisfied smile. Daniel had outgrown me, she said. Their family would not allow me to hold him back, now that he was finally successful. I opened the envelope. Divorce papers, already prepared by her attorney. They expected me to panic. They expected me to plead. They had planned this before the party, decided that humiliating me publicly would make the process easier. But then I read the agreement, and I noticed something almost funny. Buried in the legal language was a single clause. Each spouse would retain complete ownership of assets held independently before and during the marriage. They were so desperate to protect Daniel from me that they'd accidentally built a perfect shield around everything I owned. I picked up the pen and signed. My hand never shook. Daniel stared at me like I'd broken some unwritten rule. Patricia collected the papers, smiling like she'd won a battle. Nobody noticed that I was smiling, too. They thought I'd surrendered because I was defeated. In reality, I was relieved. I'd been hiding the truth for 2 years because I wanted Daniel to feel proud. That night, I realized love should never demand that you erase yourself. But here's the part Daniel would discover far too soon. 3 weeks before his celebration, Meridian Dynamics had completed a major acquisition. The company Daniel worked for had been purchased and absorbed into my corporate network. I personally reviewed the restructuring documents, including the employee performance reports, and Daniel had performed well that year. His supervisors recommended him for a regional leadership position. I approved the recommendation myself. I thought giving him that opportunity would make him feel secure and proud. I'd even planned to reveal my ownership after the promotion, so we could finally share the truth about what I'd built. Instead, Daniel used the very promotion I'd given him to humiliate me in front of his family. The next morning, Daniel arrived at headquarters in an expensive new suit, carrying himself like a man who owned the building. He expected congratulations. He expected handshakes. He expected people rushing to impress their new regional director. Instead, the moment he walked in, the conversation stopped. Employees stared at him with strange expressions. Some looked uncomfortable. Others turned away. Daniel walked toward his office with a confused smile, but the atmosphere grew more unsettling with every step. His executive assistant was waiting near the entrance, pale, holding documents. She hesitated before telling him there had been a major corporate announcement that morning. Then she handed him the restructuring notice. Daniel read the first page, then the second. His face slowly lost all its color. The company, he believed he'd been promoted within, was now part of Meridian Dynamics. The leadership structure had changed overnight. His position was under immediate review. Furious, he stormed into the executive boardroom, ready to confront whoever was responsible. He pushed open the doors and demanded an explanation. The board members were already seated, but none of them looked frightened by his anger. Their attention was fixed on the person at the head of the table, a woman in a dark tailored suit, reviewing a folder beside several corporate attorneys. Daniel stopped moving when the chair slowly turned toward him. It was me. For several seconds, he just stared. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Finally, he managed to ask what I was doing there. I reminded him that this was my company. He tried to laugh, insisted it had to be some misunderstanding. I placed the corporate ownership documents on the table and told him there was nothing unclear about them. I was the controlling shareholder, the founder, and the person who had approved the acquisition that brought his company under my authority. Daniel looked like a man who'd suddenly discovered the ground beneath him had never been solid. He tried to argue that I couldn't destroy his career over a marital dispute. I told him I wasn't doing it because he wanted a divorce. His termination was based on corporate conduct, workplace behavior, and the misuse of company status. His new position had given him access to benefits and privileges that were now under review as part of the restructuring. And then the attorneys delivered the final blow. The divorce agreement Patricia had rushed through was still valid. It protected assets owned independently by either spouse. And since Meridian Dynamics was legally mine and had never belonged to Daniel, he had no claim to it at all. The very document his mother had created to keep me away from his money had protected my company from him. It was the perfect karma. He'd spent the whole night celebrating freedom from a woman he called useless, never realizing that woman controlled the company that now controlled his career. His corporate vehicle was recalled. His executive housing was canceled. His company benefits ended with his employment. His expense accounts were sent for review. And Patricia, who had depended heavily on the lifestyle Daniel's position provided, felt the consequences almost immediately. The family that laughed at me the night before had very little left to celebrate. I walked out of that boardroom feeling lighter than I had in years. I had spent so long making myself smaller, so Daniel could feel like a bigger man. I thought love meant protecting his pride, even when protecting it meant hiding my own achievements. I finally understood that real love should never demand you erase yourself. Daniel and Patricia believed they discarded a powerless housewife. Instead, they pushed away the woman who had been quietly holding everything together. I didn't need revenge. I only needed to stop hiding the truth. From that day forward, I stopped apologizing for my success. I stopped shrinking myself for anyone, and I finally allowed myself to become the woman I'd always been. The greatest lesson I learned was simple. never underestimate the quiet person in the room. Because sometimes, the person everyone ignores is the one holding everything together. If you enjoyed the story, drop a comment and tell me, what would you have done at that party? And don't forget to subscribe to Story of Revenge for more stories of betrayal, karma, and justice that always finds its way.